morning, one and all. Today we are observing Human Rights Day across the globe to commemorate the day United Nations General Assembly adopted the UDHR in 1948. I'm fortunate to have an opportunity to talk about the pressing issues of human rights in our country. UDHR indeed marks a massive milestone in the advancement of humanitarianism. UDHR proclaimed the rights which every human being is inherently entitled to, irrespective of their religion, caste, race, ethnicity, color, language, gender, or social status. Human rights are necessary to provide every human being the basic dignity one needs to live. It gives the people the reassurance that they have the freedom of choice. These are the freedom of liberty, equality, respect, and to live for any human being. Our Constitution not only guarantees us these rights, but also takes actions against individuals who break these laws. India, world's most populous democracy, continues to have significant human rights problems despite making commitments to tackle some of the most prominent issues. We do have a thriving civil society, free media, and an independent judiciary. But long-standing abusive practices, corruption, lack of accountability of perpetrators, etc. fosters human rights violation constantly in our country. Domestic violence against women and children, inequality, child labor, human trafficking, ethnic genocide, etc. are still prevalent in our society. To protect human rights is to ensure that people receive some degree of decent and human treatment. Because all the political systems like our government, judiciary, police, media are assigned to protect human rights and to reduce the threat of world conflict. But also responsibility to protect human rights reside in individuals like us. In crisis situations, there requires humanitarian interventions to make sure that human rights violations are not occurring. Let me remind you, this can only be possible through our compassion and cooperation to achieve equitable and sustainable development for the marginalized communities. Our active participation is necessary. Thank you.
Human Rights Day was established in 1948, and ever since that auspicious day, it has stood as the first major stride forward in ensuring that the rights of every human across the globe are protected. From the most basic human needs such as food, shelter, and water, all the way up to access to free and uncensored information, such has been the goals and ambitions laid out that day. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was a shout across the world by the leading countries in the world, stating loud and clear that no matter where we live, what we believe, or how we love, we are each individually deserving of the most basic fundamentals of human needs. Every year, Human Rights Day marks conferences around the world dedicated to ensuring that these ideals are pursued and that the basic human rights of every person is made a priority in the global theatre.
Sometimes rights are defined as privileges, but when used in the context of human rights, it describes something more basic. The entitlement of fundamental rights that every individual, simply because they are human being, is called human rights. A human is born with these rights which are present until his death. All humans on this planet are entitled to these rights. These rights are effective for everyone, irrespective of who they are, where they are from, or how they choose to live their lives. These rights are developed to protect from anyone who wanted to harm or violate someone. These rights give people the freedom to live and express themselves as they want to. Everyone gets to be themselves because of these rights.
The idea of human rights is that each one of us, no matter who we are or where we are born, is entitled to the same basic rights and freedoms. Human rights are not privileges, and they cannot be granted or revoked. They are inalienable and universal. That may sound straightforward enough, but it gets incredibly complicated as soon as anyone tries to put the idea into practice. What exactly are the basic human rights? Who gets to pick them? Who enforces them, and how? The history behind the concept of human rights is a long one. Throughout the centuries and across societies, religions, and cultures, we have struggled with defining notions of rightfulness, justice, and rights. But one of the most modern affirmations of universal human rights emerged from the ruins of World War II with the creation of the United Nations. The treaty that established the UN gives as one of its purposes to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights. And with the same spirit, in 1948, the UN General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This document, written by an international committee chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt, lays the basis for modern international human rights law. The Declaration is based on the principle that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. It lists 30 articles recognizing, among other things, the principle of non-discrimination and the right to life and liberty. It refers to negative freedoms, like the freedom from torture or slavery, as well as positive freedoms, such as the freedom of movement and residence. It encompasses basic civil and political rights, such as freedom of expression, religion, or peaceful assembly, as well as social, economic, and cultural rights, such as the right to education and the right to freely choose one's occupation and be paid and treated fairly. The Declaration takes no sides as to which rights are more important, insisting on their universality, indivisibility, and interdependence. And in the past decades, international human rights law has grown, deepening and expanding our understanding of what human rights are and how to better protect them. So if these principles are so well developed, then why are human rights abused and ignored time and time again all over the world? The problem, in general, is that it is not at all easy to universally enforce these rights or to punish transgressors. The UDHR itself, despite being highly authoritative and respected, is a declaration, not a hard law. So when individual countries violate it, the mechanisms to address those violations are weak. For example, the main bodies within the UN in charge of protecting human rights mostly monitor and investigate violations. But they cannot force states to, say, change a policy or compensate a victim. That's why some critics say it's naive to consider human rights a given in a world where state interests wield so much power. Critics also question the universality of human rights and emphasize that their development has been heavily guided by a small number of mostly Western nations to the detriment of inclusiveness. The result? A general bias in favor of civil political liberties over socio-political rights and of individual over collective or groups' rights. Others defend universal human rights laws and point at the positive role they have on setting international standards and helping activists in their campaigns. They also point out that not all international human rights instruments are powerless. For example, the European Convention on Human Rights establishes a court where the 47 member countries and their citizens can bring cases. The court issues binding decisions that each member state must comply with. Human rights law is constantly evolving, as are our views and definitions of what the basic human rights should be.